Hello and welcome to this ABLOY Academy virtual instructor-led training session. Today our topic is going to be access control cables, connections, and power transfers, and kind of what that means when you're thinking about access control for a door for hardware. Before we get started though, I wanted to talk just a couple minutes about some housekeeping things. Everybody's line is muted, but you can communicate to me via the Q&A feature built into Zoom. I would imagine that everybody is an expert at Zoom at this point, but I will be monitoring the Q&A as we go on today. So if you have any questions that I can answer, please send those over. Also, please check out our ABLOY Online Academy, where we have over 50 courses that you can take at no charge to you. Great information, everything from door closers to handing to exit devices. ABLOY specific information, but also industry specific information as well, completely free. And we're always adding courses. I think in 2020, we added somewhere between 20 and 30 new courses on a myriad of topics. So please check that out if you haven't been on in a while, or if you don't have an account at all. We would love to have you there. When we get released and we're able to safely travel again, then our events calendar will also be up and running, and those will be live in-person training events all over the country. So stay tuned for that whenever we get released there. Also, if you need proof of attendance for today's class, you're going to get an email from our Academy Zoom account, so be looking for that in your spam folder if it doesn't show up in your inbox. So with that, we're going to continue on today's session. We'll have you here 45 minutes to an hour and then let you have the rest of your Friday back. With everything safety first, if you are a technician or you're going to be working on access control, follow proper safety protocols, wear that PPE equipment just to protect you and potentially protect the equipment that you're working with. Some of this access control equipment is very sensitive to electrical shock and shorting out. It's not a good thing. So safety first. For our training outline today, this is kind of what we're going to do. The purpose of today's class is to give you a general understanding of the type of connections and the cables and the door and frame preps that you have to think about when recommending or working with an access control solution. We'll talk a little bit about traditional versus non-traditional access control. We'll talk about Electrolynx connections, that is our connection system that goes from our hardware to our power transfers or our hinges, and then to harnesses, ultimately to your access control system, your panel. We'll talk about some hinges, the power transfers, and the cables themselves, where you can find those in the catalog and which of our ABLOY companies provide those. And then we'll also talk from a really high level what you need to think about if you're ordering a door and a frame to be prepped for access control. And that means the door having the cable already run through the door for your access control solution, and then also thinking about the prep, the cutout necessary if you're going to be using a transfer, power and EPT, electronic power transfer, or a hinge, and all of those things. So we're going to get right into it today. So I want to talk just a couple minutes about typical online full access control. This is something that if you've been around access control, this is very traditional, very typical, where you have multiple wire runs to multiple devices to make everything work. This is very labor intensive. It can be very expensive to have installed because of all the individual wire runs, all of the holes that have to be prepped, and so on. So if we had, let's say, an electric strike that we want to unlock, whenever it gets a proper badge signal, you'll often find readers, wall readers that read a badge on a wall. So that's an installation point, and that's a wire that runs to a connection point or your access control panel. You'll also have your electrified lock, and so in this case we're talking about an electric strike. You need a door position switch or door position sensor to let your access control system know the state of the door. You also would need a request to exit so that it doesn't send out an alarm or a door forced alarm It lets people, lets the system know that people are exiting if they're allowed to exit. Also helps with just knowing where the door is. So you can see all of these wire runs, and then ultimately to an access control system and to a computer. And that is still done a lot. But we have some other solutions here at ASSA ABLOY, and one of those is an integrated Wiegand. This is a hardwired solution, but all of those things that we just looked at are self-contained into the lock itself. So you've got the reader built onto the door in the trim, or in some cases it can be detached from the trim. You have the door position sensor, you have the request to exit. You can also, in some cases, do deadbolt monitoring, latch bolt monitoring, all of these things built into the lock. So we have a cable that runs through the door. You have to pay attention if the door is going to be fire rated. We have some courses that are offered where you're actually allowed to drill through certain fire rated doors, provided that you take a course on how to do it properly. But let's talk about a non-fire rated door. You would drill through the door. If it's hollow metal, oftentimes you don't have to drill, and you can run a wire across to the lock. This could be a cylindrical lock, it could be a mortise lock. Also an exit device are available in all of this technology, this integrated Wiegand. And then you have some way of transferring that power and that data across the gap from the door to the frame. It can go through an electrified hinge where the wires are actually running through the hinge. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Also an electrified power transfer. That's not going through the hinge, that's actually going across through a different area, usually above the middle hinge. And then ultimately there is a harness, a cable that runs up the frame into the ceiling or through conduit and ultimately to our access control system. We can also do this with PoE, power over Ethernet. Think of a printer or a PoE phone system. Our locks basically run about the same way. So you have the lock that contains all of the things that I was talking about earlier, your request to exit, your door position switch, your reader, everything is on the door, and you run a network cable through the door to the lock, and again, we're running it through an electrified hinge or a power transfer, and then to a PoE switch. So talking about running cables through the doors, we have to make connections. Sometimes there's a quick plug and play connection. Sometimes you'll find that the wires are bare depending on how they were ordered, and you have different options on how to connect those wires. So if we're looking at IWP, integrated Wiegand, that's going to be a 12-wire system most of the time. And if you order the door prepped for IWP, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a 12-wire or 12-conductor cable that runs through the door. And we have some options. Now, our option is Electrolynx, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But if you're a technician, you've probably seen these out in the field. The first one is Type B connector. It's also called Dolphin. That is a manufacturer name for those connections. So across the country, I've seen it called Dolphin connector. I've also heard in some areas people call them beanies, but if you just order them online, they're Type B connectors. They're okay. I'll talk about the pros and cons of each of these in a second. You could have wire nuts, which I don't recommend. It's a mess. It doesn't stay organized. The wire nuts can come off because the wires are so small, and it's stranded. You can have some issues with that. You could also have Molex connectors, if you can see there on the far right. That's actually our system called Electrolynx, where every wire has a home within that plastic connector. It's already predetermined. We have a wiring schematic or a wiring method that is across all of our integrated Wiegand product. All the wires for the particular thing that you're testing or sending data is all going to be in the correct place for you. So let's talk a little bit more about the Type B connectors. So basically how it would work, you would strip your wires down, although they say that you don't have to strip the insulation jacket off. I would recommend that you do that if you're going to use these. Twist those wires together so that you make a good connection, And then these just get smashed with a pair of pliers. I like to use lineman pliers and use the back part of that plier you can see there. All we're doing is smashing it flat. So they're easy to use. They're pretty fast and efficient. You don't need any special tools. They are really one-time only use. It's almost impossible to get them off without destroying the connector itself. So it's not something that you can just take on and take off. And you can also get them with a dielectric moisture blocking gel. So if these are going to be outside in a really high humid environment, that can work pretty well. The cons is you can have loose connections if you don't use them right. I mentioned that they're one-time use. They can be difficult to use when troubleshooting. They do have an opening at the top where you can probe them with a multimeter, but it can be difficult to hold, and sometimes you don't get a good connection when you're testing them. And they're individual, so you use one of those per every set of wires that you're connecting together. So if you're doing a 12 wire cable and you're connecting everything, it can make kind of a big bundle. Versus wire nuts. And again, I don't recommend these for access control. They're great for AC. They're great for your houses. Actually, they are required by electrical code for certain types of electrical alternating current voltage for your houses with solid wire. We're not going to get into all of that today, but they are easy to use. They're quick. You don't need any special tools. They're readily available. You can get them at major box stores such as Lowe's, Home Depot, Canadian Tire, whatever you have near you, you can get wire nuts. But they don't work well for the small gauge wire, so the small diameter wire that we have with access control. They can break the wire if you over twist them. If you under twist them, they can pop off. If they pop off and you just happen to be the hot wire, the powered wire, then it can short on the inside of the door and blow your access control fuses, relays, your devices themselves. So not good thing to use for access control. They can be used when doing troubleshooting because it's pretty easy to make a connection, test something, take it off. They are removable, which is nice, but you just have to take care. Versus Electrolynx. So Electrolynx is our system, and we use a very well-established company called Molex, and Molex makes the connectors and the pin terminals that we use in our wiring. So Electrolynx is what we call it because we take their connectors, their pins, we put the wires, our wires for all of our integrated Wiegand product in a specific order. They're plug and play. You order our hardware with our transfer cables, our power transfers. Everything is plug and play. Again, everything is plug and play. So you save a lot of time in installation. It's very, very simple to do. We also sell, and our electromechanical specialists that are out in the field carry a Wiegand test box. A WT2 is what it's called, or the older version is a WT1, but it's a test box where you can troubleshoot the lock. You can fire a bolt, you can fire the latch bolt on a lock, you can test the reader, you can test the door position switch, the request to exit. All of those things you can be tested with this little test box, and it's just a plug and play. We do find a lot of times in the field, people don't realize that they're plug and play, and they cut these connectors off, and then they have to wire them, and oftentimes they use B connectors or dolphins to do that. But I would highly recommend that if you see these connectors, they do plug into our product, so use them that way. The cable management is really clean. There are, I guess, some, I wouldn't say necessarily cons, but some learning things that you have to do. You do need a special crimping tool. They do make aftermarket crimping tools on Amazon and other places. I have not used them personally. I've only used the recommended Molex tool. So if you're going to use an aftermarket tool, that's at your own risk, I guess. So let's talk a little bit more about the connectors and the pin terminals. So this is what we have. We have plastic connectors that plug together, a male and a female. When you're looking at the pins, that's actually how we determine the male and the female. So if you're ordering extra, don't look at the plastic connector when you're trying to figure out which was which. You're going to find that you use a lot more male pins if you're ordering these from Mckinney, or you could actually get them from other electrical suppliers as well. But let's take a look at the individual pins. So the first thing I want to point out is this back end of this pin is the strain relief that actually wraps around the insulated jacket of the wire. That helps to prevent the wire from breaking if it gets twisted or it vibrates. You have the wire clamp. This actually needs to clamp around the bare conductor of the wire, so the piece of wire that's sticking out from the jacket. We have a channel slot. This helps to align them and make sure that you're putting them in the plastic connector the right direction. They will not go in fully upside down or sideways. So and we try to keep it really consistent on how they go in. So if you pay attention to that, that little channel slot will help you guide them in the right place. And then we have a one-way locking tang, or Molex does, that prevents these from popping out once they get fully seated. And we do sell a removal tool. It's a tool that goes in there and it presses on those little one-way tangs and helps you remove them out of a plastic connector. Let's say that you put the wrong color in the wrong slot. You can remove it with some practice. And then we have the actual pin that would slide into the other female pin. So let's take a look at a poor connection. And this is kind of hard to see. We have classes, hands-on classes, where we teach how to make these cables in a normal time period, right? And this is often hard to see. So if you need cheaters, and I'm right there, just in a year or two, I'm going to need reading glasses. And these are becoming harder and harder for me to see. So I like to use actually a set of jeweler's loop headset when I'm making these, just so I can make sure that I get a good connection. But right here, you can see that the strain relief is wrapped around the bare wire, and it's not wrapped around the insulation of the wire. So that wouldn't work. Well, technically it would work, but the wire could break. So we need to make sure that we try our best to get a good connection. And this is also something that's really, really easy to do when you're using the crimping tools, because these wires are so small, is to insert the wire too far into the pin, and you're actually end up clamping around the insulation. We have a very, very weak connection because we don't have anything actually crimped and wrapped around the bare conductor. So this is also something that we find oftentimes in classes when the students are handing us these wires. We look them over and we find that either they're too far back and they're clamped, both of the clamps are around the bare conductor, or it's they're clamping around the insulation itself. So here's a good couple of views of a good connection. The first one, you can see that the strain relief is actually wrapped around the insulation. The wire clamp is wrapped around the bare conductor, and same thing on the bottom image. That's what a proper connection looks like. So how do we do that? We take our wires, we strip back the wire insulation an 1/8 of an inch. Too little and too much, we could have some issues. So 1/8 of an inch as best you can. You take your Molex crimping tool, and this is something that's available from Mckinney. Mckinney is one of our brands. It's available from Mckinney. Mckinney also, you can get cables and hinges that are electrified from Mckinney as well. But all of your pins and plastic terminals, everything Molex Electrolynx system can be ordered through Mckinney. So if you were confused on who supplies those, that would be, again, Mckinney. I'm going to say it again. We want to take that tool and we're going to fully squeeze it. We're going to go all the way until you hear the last click. You're going to hear several clicks as you're squeezing it, but until fully squeeze it, and then you'll let go and the jaws will open. So here's a little video showing that. All right, it opens up, and what it does is it shows the loading area for that. So this is where we load the pin. We press on the back side, there's a little red button. We load the pin facing up, the U shape of that wire clamp and everything facing up. I'll show a quick video of that. So there's that little red button. Press that in, hold it in, and then we can load our pin. Once we load our pin, we let go of that red button. It puts it in the right position in the crimping tool. We do one click and then we insert the wire until we can't insert the wire any further. Then we do a full squeeze to completely crimp it. So this is the recommended method from Molex. I'm going to show you a different way that I prefer, although I have done it this way. This one makes it hard for me to feel if I've inserted the wire too far. But it works fine. Let's see that again. So one click, insert that wire until it stops, and then a full crimp. And I'm putting that in to the far left-hand side because the actual crimp tool is based on wire gauge size. So the diameter of your wire, if you're a 22 to 24 gauge, which I had a 24 gauge wire, I'm going to be in the far left-hand side. 20 gauge is going to be in the middle, or if it's a super fine wire, 26 to 30, that's going to be in the far right-hand side for that tool. So here's an alternate method to that, still ends up crimping. I like to do is not do that initial first click, leave the plastic loading piece retracted just like you would on the other sense, but this way I can actually see the strain relief and the wire clamp, and I drop the wire top down, drop it into that open area, and then continue to watch it, continue to look at it, and fully squeeze. And you can see what I do here in this video. So I leave it open, I don't do that initial click, I drop it into the right spot, and I do a complete crimp. I find it faster for me. If you like the other method, great. If you find something that works even better for you, awesome. For all of our Electrolynx system, again, we keep the same wires in the same position. So we give you these little cheat cards, and if you buy a harness from us, a wire, a cable from us, that doesn't have pins plugged into the terminals on one side, then we'll actually give you one of these cards so that you can make sure that you snap all of those pins in the right position. Okay, you can order these in packs of 10 from us, from Mckinney, if you would like to give these to your techs so they have them on their trucks. But this ensures that all of the male and female ends plug into the right spot and all the wires are in the right position. And if you need to write down that part number, that is a QC Delta Charlie Charlie. Here is just a page out of the Mckinney catalog, and this is all the information. You can find that by going online to our online resource center, to our digital catalog, and clicking on Mckinney, and then going into the Mckinney catalog, you can find all of this information. So you can order the crimping tool directly from them. You can order just individual packs of male plugs, male receptacles, pin terminals, whatever you need, you can get them from them. And you can also get a service kit. The QCR Romeo 001 does not include a crimping tool, okay? But it does include an assortment of plugs and terminals, male and female, 2 conductor, I believe 4 and 8s. So I think that's right. Anyway, just know it doesn't come with a tool. So you still need to buy a tool, even if you buy the service kit. Service kit is a great thing to start, and then you will probably need some 8 conductors, some 4s, and some male pins, is at least what we use more than anything. You can buy retrofit cables that are pinned on both sides already, or if you're running this retrofit cable from a power transfer or a hinge up a frame or down a frame, depending on how you've got it set up, you can get them pinned only on one side, and that makes the bundle of wire a lot smaller, easier to wrap with, say, some electrical tape and get it through an installation hole. Once you get it where you need it, then you can use that card that is supplied and put on the plugs. You can also get the PoE cables. The PoE cables are going to be blue. To my knowledge, all of the regular Electrolynx cables are gray, at least every time I've ordered them. They have been gray. All the PoE cables have always been blue. So if you know that you have an IN 220 series PoE lock, you're going to need a blue harness. Comes with Electrolynx on one side, and then it will come with the RJ45 Ethernet on the other side. So talking about PoE, how do we make those connections? Let's take just a couple of minutes and look at that. So RJ45 is a very standard connector. It's going to be plugged into, if you have an office, it's going to be plugged into virtually anything and everything that is PoE. And that could be your phone system, your printers, all kinds of things nowadays are PoE. So what do we need? We need the correct cable for our system, and used to have Cat4 and then Cat5 and Cat5e and now Cat6, and I'm sure there's probably more beyond that, but that is, the cables are designed for a certain amount of data transfer, and they're also designed for a certain amount of noise isolation, right? So we've got a lot of data that's flowing through these cables. We need to make sure that we have the appropriate cable for the right application. And you'll always be able to find that information with our locks. And if you're an access control integrator, you can find that information as well. So, and this is the way that I like to do it. There are probably other ways to do it, but this is going to be, again, general information for you. I like to strip back the insulation on that Cat5e, Cat6 cable 1.5 inches. I then separate all the pairs. The pairs are going to be twisted, so it is an 8 conductor cable, but we're going to strip those back, and then I use a screwdriver to flatten the cables out because they are all twisted at different amounts. And then you need to line them up per the colors that you need. So if you're doing 568B, then it's going to be set up like this. This is the way that our product is connected, which you have white, orange, orange, white, green, blue, white, blue, green, white, brown, brown. That is a very common way of hooking these up. There are other ways to do it, but this is the way that we do it for our product. Once you get all of those in the right order, all those wires in the right order, you would slide your RJ45 connector after you've cut it down to 1/2 inch. They also make connectors that have holes in the end of them where you don't have to cut the wires back 1/2 inch. You can leave them 1.5 inches long and slide them all the way through the connector, and then you use a special crimper that crimps the wires and also cuts the excess length off at the same time. These are great. They're fantastic for speed. If you have a ton of these to do, I would recommend that system. They are a little bit more expensive, but you save all of that in the amount of labor. But I also know people that are just as fast doing this than the newer system. Slide that into your crimping tool, a full crimp, and those little brass crimping terminals actually go all the way through the insulation of those wires. So you don't have to peel back those to bare conductors like you would do on, say, the Electrolynx system. So if we got our access control system, and here we're looking at, say, an MELR, a motorized electric latch retraction exit device from Corbin Russwin or Yale, and we need to transfer data and power from the exit device to a hinge, and we do that with power transfers, and that could be an electrified hinge or a separate device that would be typically above the hinge. We do need a cable always to go in between the device and the transfer. With our product, you're never going to connect the device directly to the transfer, right? So if you have a harness, it's going to be male on both sides, and that's what's going to connect the female of the device to the female of the power transfer. So again, if you're taking notes, all of our power transfers and our hinges that are electrified are going to be female on both sides. If you need a harness, maybe you need to build one, maybe somebody forgot to order one, or you didn't want to do that, you want to make them yourself. If you need one for an exit device, you might need a longer one for a mortise lock or a cylindrical lock. Just know that the harness that you build that connects hardware to the transfer will be male on both sides. If we're ordering doors that are prepped and ready to go, here are some typical transfer locations for you to consider. If you have a door that has a full glass, full light in it, then you have the option of going up and over or down around. If you have 4 hinges, you have to specify, hey, which hinge do you want it to come down from? 3 hinges, typically your middle hinge, if you're using an electrified hinge, is going to be the one where you're sending power across. Again, if you have an exit device, you're going to need a shorter cable. If you have a cylindrical lock or a mortise lock, you will need a harness or a cable that goes all the way from the hardware all the way to the edge of the door. I want to say this, that when you're ordering hollow metal doors with a cable, you do need to specify PoE if you need PoE. If you ordered a door with a cable and do not specify PoE, then you're going to get a gray cable. It's going to be a 12 conductor, and it would work with our integrated Wiegand solutions, but it would not work with our PoE hardware. So definitely something to note. Moving on to the specific products themselves, and again, this is going to be a really, really high level overview, and we're always adding products, so this is not an exhaustive also view of everything in the catalog. So definitely check out our catalogs if you're looking for something specific, or get in touch with our tech services team with Mckinney, Pemco, Securetron, all of those guys that supply these electrified power transfers and or hinges, and they're a wealth of knowledge and information. And sometimes we can do custom things that are not in the catalog. So if you can't find it in the catalog, don't just write us off. Get in touch with us. It may be something that they can do on a special request. So if we're talking about hinges, hinges can come in many different forms and varieties. And again, if you need a very, very specialty hinge, it's not in the catalog as electrified or as an electrified option, please get in touch with us and find out if it's something that we can do in a special request. But in general, our hinges can handle up to a 16 amp inrush for maximum of 300 milliseconds. Okay, you do a 4 amp continuous at 24 volts, and you can specify a QC2. QC meaning the Electrolynx Quick Connect system, 2 meaning just 2 conductors, 2 wires, 8 wires, or 12. You would need to specify that. Right now, just right out of the catalog, you can do 2, 3, 5 knuckle hinges, standard and heavy duty, full mortise, and then for your swing clear, your wide throw, and your anchor hinges, sometimes Mckinney needs to know exactly what your dimensions are, how big they're going to be, and then they can tell you if they can do it or they can't. I'd say most of the time they are able to run wires through a specialty hinge, but check with Mckinney if it's something specialty. You can also get these hinges. Let's say that you're ordering the hinges and you're not ordering them Electrolynx. You're not ordering them with the connectors. You're going to order them just bare conductor because perhaps you're hooking it up to something else. You can get them in the 4, 8, or 12 wire, and again, it's just a bare conductor. You're not going to have the Electrolynx. So if you mess up and you put CC down instead of QC, then you're going to get the bare wires without the connectors on them. Okay. You can also get some of our hinges PoE, and that's, again, you need to specify the PoE if you want that, because again, the wires have to maintain a twist to make sure that we cut down on noise and data crosstalk as it's going through the hinge. So we maintain that twist so the wires and the cables are different. Also within the Mckinney data transfer or the transfer device solutions catalog, I know that's a mouthful, there's a really, really awesome couple of pages on all of our access control solutions and which cable or how many conductors is required for that lock. This is something really, really awesome to pay attention to. Everything from our PoE to our IWP, Mortise locks, cylindrical locks. So if you know what lock model you have and you're not quite sure if we need a 2 conductor, an 8 conductor, or 12 conductor, take a look at this couple of pages in the Mckinney catalog, and that can help you out. And again, if you get lost, please get in touch with us. It's good to, you know, get a second opinion, make sure that you're on the right track. With power transfers are available from PIMCO, Marcar, and they are also available from Mckinney and Securitron. So there's just a few of our brands that have power transfers. And with PIMCO, a reason why I mentioned PIMCO makes the aluminum continuous geared hinges, and you can also get those continuous hinges electrified. And you have a couple of different options. You have the option to have them serviceable. Okay, serviceable, removable. That means that your hinge comes in 3 pieces. Okay, the hinge comes in 3 pieces. The middle section is going to be your power transfer. That's the part that the wires are going to be going through. That makes it really, really handy. You can actually have that section of the hinge sent to your access control integrator so that they get that and they can then install it later on at the job site. That makes it to where the integrator doesn't have to be there on the day that the doors and the frames are being hung. So that's something to think about. Or you can also order this accessible. If you order accessible, that means that the hinge is all going to be one continuous long hinge, but the middle section is going to be articulating so that you could take the screws off, you can get to the wires while the door is still hung. Okay, so serviceable means it can be removed entirely with the door hung, and you can also hang the door individually without that piece. And then accessible means that you can get to the wires, but it's still a part of the hinge. With Marcar makes the pin and barrel stainless steel hinges, so this power transfer is going to be a little bit different. Typically, this is going to be right in the middle of the hinge. That's where they're going to put the power transfer, unless you specify something else. So if you don't tell them where to put the power transfer, it's going to be right in the middle. So you can specify a specific height if you have a reason for that. And there is also a current transfer prep information form if you're going to not use the power transfer from Marcar, but you want a continuous pin and barrel hinge, but you want it cut out so you can use your own power transfer, one from another company. As long as you know the dimensions, then you can fill out this form. There is a charge for cutting that out. They'll cut out the rectangle, whatever you need, on both sides so that you can have the hinge put in and then install your power transfer. You have the option of doing a door cord, and this would be an external thing that you could see. It's not concealed like a hinge or a power transfer, so it can be really, really high prone to vandalism. They're very inexpensive, but again, it's great for somebody to catch it with a cart or just rip it off the wall because they're bored or they're mad. So they can increase service calls, but they are really inexpensive, cheap, easy to install. Something to think about. Mckinney power transfers are available in several different shapes and sizes, different wire amounts, all of these things. So check out that. The EPT, EPT-L, the EPT is good up to a door that opens to 105 degrees. If you want the door to open 180 degrees, then you would need the EPT-L. So just think about that. Also, the EL in front of our EPTs. I know I'm giving you a lot of acronyms, but the EL stands for the Electrolynx. That's the quick connect. So if you just get the EPT, don't put the EL in front of it, you're going to get bare wires. You're not going to get the connectors. Securitron also sells the power transfers, and they have the EL EPT and the CEPT. So I'm going to specialties talk about this for just a second, okay? The CEPT is the same dimensions as a couple of other competitor power transfers, so that makes it easy if you wanted to drop one of these in. I do want to note for power transfers, the CEPT from Securitron is the only one that's available with PoE, okay? And you would specify CE or C5E, Cat5E, C5E for any of those combinations that they sell if you would like PoE wires installed into it. The other transfers are not available PoE. Okay, so for PoE, you have the option of going hinge or this CEPT. So let's talk for just a minute about things that the door companies need to know in order to make your life easy, right? Ordering doors, there is several million ways that you can order a door and a frame. And there are millions and millions of ways you can order hardware. But the more information that you can give the door companies, the better. So this is an old form. If you were doing it on paper back in the day, you would give them this information. If you're ordering online, they still need this information, although the order forms are going to look different. But they need to know the lock type. So if you are installing an access control lock, they need the model number. So you would put that in the little area there. It says lock or strike. Are you going to be using a hinge or a power transfer, right? They have areas where you can tell them, hey, I need this prepped for a power transfer. And if it's prepped for a power transfer, they're going to need to know where you want it, okay? How are you measuring also? Like, I need it 4 inches up from the center line of the middle hinge. Well, that's great. That's really specific. They can handle that. If you don't give them that information, you'll get an information request back. Say, hey, you asked for an EPT prep. We don't know where you want it. Okay, they're not going to assume where you want it. They also don't know which power transfer you are using unless you tell them. So we've got to tell them which one that we're using. And if it's not something, if it's not one of ours, if it's a different company's, then we would need to provide them with measurements and a template from that power transfer so they know exactly how big to make it. And then also, if you're having them run the cable through the door, is it PoE? If you don't specify PoE, then you're going to get a gray cable that's designed for integrated Wiegand. So in the Seco catalog, you have a few options there. You have the EH1, that is the electric hinge prep. That's access hole only without the wire, okay? You could have the EH4, that's with the Electrolynx, or you can have the EH5, which is for PoE, and that would go under the special hinge pivot location for that order form. Okay. We also need to tell them if it's a standard EPT2 or prep for the EPTX, let them know that. If it's something special, again, provide templates and measurements. For Curry's, very similar. That information goes into the hinge area, EPT, electronic power transfer, HGE, electrified hinge, And so final thoughts on all of this is access control doesn't have to be difficult. We can make things simpler by putting everything on the door and having one cable. It makes installation easier. It makes troubleshooting easier. But when you're ordering all of this stuff, there's a lot of coordination that has to happen. Make sure you get your EMS involved, your electromechanical specialists. Make sure you get the factory involved. All of these, as much information as you can possibly give us, the better, so that everything goes nice and smooth on the day of installation and the day of implementation and hookup. So with that, we're going to talk just a couple of minutes about some resources that will help you find information, help you do your job better, help us. Customer support app is fantastic. If you have not downloaded this, it's completely free download. Apple, iTunes Store, App Store, or also the Play Store on Android, Google. It's just called ASSA ABLOY Customer Support. And then on your phone, if you're looking for it, it's just called Customer Support. They didn't put the ASSA ABLOY in front. But that allows you to connect with a customer support rep, a tech rep while you're out in the field. You can actually stream video with a tech rep if you're working on something specific. Hey, I'm having an issue. You can show them what you're looking at, which I think is a really, really useful tool. You can get to, it's a portal to get to all of our catalogs, our cut sheets, our installation diagrams, our installation sheets, everything like that from all of our brands, not just our electrified product, but all of our mechanical product as well. From every brand within North America, you can get to that information. If you're working on a computer or a desktop, our ASSA ABLOY Resource Center is again at portal, so that you can get to all of our individual brands and all of the digital libraries that can get you the price books, the catalogs, the cut sheets, the sell sheets, anything and everything that you need to know, you can find there, ASSAABLOYDSS.com. If you go there, top, middle, you're going to see Resource Center. Click on that, go down to collateral material. Once you get to collateral material, you can select your brand. So if you're going to Mckinney, click Mckinney, and then from there you're already, you'll look at all of the resources they have built in PDF. They're interactive. You can click on menus and that'll hotspot right to or hyperlink over to a specific page. Also an app that we send some of our installation instructions and CAD drawings to is Built, B-I-L-T. Some of our access control products are on this that gives you step-by-step interactive how-to guide on the full install. So check that out, BILT. You find that also Apple and Android. The ASSA ABLOY Egress calculator is something that Katie Flower with a team of ASSA ABLOY people launched last year. This is something that's fantastic. It allows you to calculate your occupant load, your egress width, quantity of exits, your swing direction of doors, all based on the International Building Code and several versions of that code depending on what you have in your jurisdiction. It also allows you to download and save everything via PDF once you calculate everything out. So check that out. It's a really fantastic tool. We have done, or Katie has done, multiple classes demoing this tool and showing how to use it. You can find all of those at our previously recorded webinars section on our website. So the same place where you came to register for this class, you can find a recorded session on how to use the egress calculator, and you can also get that calculator at egresscalc.assaabloy.com. And with that, I want to thank everybody so much for tuning in today on this Friday. I hope the weather where you are is fantastic and you have a great weekend. I'm going to stick around and see if there's any questions. If not, again, have a great, fantastic day and check out the rest of what we're doing.